All right, today we are diving into a theory that is, well, it's ambitious. We're talking about a fundamental map of reality itself. So let's just start with a huge question. What if the universe, in all its crazy, beautiful complexity, could actually be broken down into just three simple, repeating parts? It's a mind-bending thought for sure, and it's exactly where our journey begins today. So this incredible framework, it's called the uni-info theory. And just so we're all on the same page, it's pronounced uni-info. It's a really unique and fascinating attempt to, build a blueprint for everything we see and experience. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with what uni-info actually is. Then we'll break down its three core pieces. After that, we'll see how they all interact in this constant dance, dive into a really deep philosophical idea called vacantism. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at why any of this abstract stuff might actually matter in the real world. All right. First things first, what exactly is this theory? So the name uni-info, that's short for universal information. But I want to be clear, this is not about data or computer science. It's really an umbrella term for a huge metaphysical theory about, well, existence itself and how we might even apply it. Basically, it's a model for understanding the fundamental building blocks of everything. Okay, so right at the very heart of the uni-info theory, you'll find this really simple but incredibly powerful trio of concepts. This core trio, it has a name. It's called the trinion. And the big idea here is that every single concrete thing is made up of a combination of these three symbolic parts. You've got the circle, which is its form, the arrow, which is its content, or the change it's going through, and the equal sign, which represents the law that holds them all together. Yeah, this table right here really gets to the core of it. Each symbol has a very specific role to play. The circle is like the container, the form of all forms. You can think of that as knowledge. Then you have the arrow, the dynamic stuff inside it, the content of all contents. That's info. And finally, the equal sign. That's the law of all laws that balances the other two. That's wisdom. So how do we even get to this trinion? Well, the theory builds it up with three pretty simple logical steps. First, just imagine that a circle, some kind of form, exists. Got it? Okay. Second, the circle isn't just sitting there. It's always changing and becoming different things. And we call that whole process the arrow. And third, and this is the key part, these two things aren't separate. The circle and the arrow are really just two sides of the same coin, unified by the equal sign. So, okay, we've got our three parts. But here's the thing. They don't just sit there. Nope. They are locked in this constant, never-ending, interdependent dance. This brings us to the whole idea of intrinsic properties. The theory basically says that nothing, and I mean nothing, is purely static or purely dynamic. It's always a mix. So everything that looks stable and solid to you is actually being held up by constant motion. And on the flip side, everything that's moving relies on stable, unchanging parts to do it. They literally can't exist without each other. This gives a perfect example for the dynamic side. Just think about a spinning top. When it's going really fast, it looks perfectly stable, right? A solid circle. But that stability is only possible because of its constant looping motion. Those are the arrows. The form is literally created by the content in motion. And now let's flip it and look at it from the other direction. Imagine a car driving down the road. It's clearly in motion. That's our arrow. But that forward movement is only possible because of its wheels, which are these stable, unchanging forms, our circles, that rotate but don't actually change their shape. So in this case, the motion totally depends on static parts. And this constant, self-sustaining loop between motion and stability, it leads to a much, much bigger question. If everything is creating everything else, then what in the world came first? And that question, well, that takes us to the deepest, most mind-bending part of the theory. It's an idea that really challenges our whole concept of beginnings and foundations. It's called vacantism. Now, this is not nihilism. It's not saying there's nothing. What vacantism proposes is that there is no single, independent first thing that kicked everything off. The universe isn't built on some solid foundation. It's more like a vacant space of pure potential, always ready to take on a form, but with no pre-existing essence of its own. This idea of a kind of productive emptiness, it's not totally out of left field. It actually echoes some really ancient wisdom, like this incredible line from the Tao Te Ching, which describes the Tao as this vacant, bottomless source that all things spring from. So if there's no first cause, no ultimate foundation, what are we left with? Well, we're left with a self-creating cycle. It's what's often called a strange loop, and you can't get a better visual for it than M.C. Escher's drawing of the two hands, where each one is drawing the other into existence. There's no real beginning or end, just this endless creative process feeding back on itself. Okay, so you might be thinking, an endless creative loop, that's cool, but what's the point? Well, this model isn't just some abstract thought experiment. It actually offers a whole new blueprint for looking at really complex, real-world systems. So the big question is, why does this framework actually matter? Well, for starters, this framework gives us new ways to think about some seriously complex fields. Let's take artificial intelligence. We tend to think of a large language model as just a static box that knows stuff. But using this theory, you could see it as a dance. The model's structure, that's the circle, is constantly being reshaped by the torrent of data flowing through it. That's the arrow. It becomes an emergent, interactive system. This new perspective could even provide a structure for organizing knowledge itself in a system that the theory calls a uninet. So let's wrap it all up with this thought. The uniform info theory, at the end of the day, is a mental model. It's a new lens to look through. So what if you started looking at the world not as just a collection of static, separate things, but as this constant, self-creating dance between form, content, and the laws that bind them? What new connections, what incredible new patterns do you think you'd start to see?